Viktor Frankl did not choose his education. It was imposed on him, with terrifying completeness, in the years between 1942 and 1945, across 4 concentration camps where he was prisoner number 119104 and where everything he had built, his career, his manuscripts, his family, his name, was systematically taken from him. What he did choose was what to do with what he had learned. And the curriculum of that education, assembled from the evidence of his own survival and the observation of those who survived alongside him and those who did not, became one of the most influential bodies of psychological thought in the 20th century. The first and most fundamental thing Frankl learned from the camps was the empirical reality of inner freedom. He had believed in it theoretically, as a philosophical position derived from his reading of phenomenology and existential philosophy. But in the camps, he discovered it as a lived fact. Under conditions designed to abolish every human freedom, some people continued to make choices that expressed genuine values, continuing to care, to share, to maintain dignity, to find meaning in small acts of resistance. These choices could not be explained by conditioning or circumstance. They were expressions of a dimension of the human person that the worst the world could do had not been able to reach. The second lesson was the life and death importance of meaning. Frankl observed, again and again, that the critical variable separating those who endured from those who collapsed was not physical strength, not prior social advantage, not even sheer luck, though luck certainly played a role, but the presence or absence of a convincing inner answer to the question, why am I still here? The man who had a person waiting for him, a work to complete, a testimony to bear, a value to uphold. Such a man had resources that pure biological willpower could not supply. The man who had lost every why deteriorated with a speed that startled even experienced observers. The third lesson was about the nature of the human being's worst possibilities. Frankl did not emerge from the camps with a sentimental view of humanity. He had seen cruelty, betrayal, and moral collapse at intimate range, and not only from the perpetrators but from prisoners themselves, under the pressure of extremity. He understood that the human being contains both the saint and the savage, and that which emerges under pressure depends not on inherent nature but on choice, on the decisions, repeated daily and sometimes hourly, about what one will and will not do regardless of what is being done to one. The fourth lesson was about the relationship between the past and the present. In the camps, Frankl and other prisoners sometimes retreated into memory, into the recalled presence of loved ones, into the images of a different life. Frankl noticed something in this retreat that deepened his understanding of human temporality. The past, he came to believe, is not lost. It is preserved in a way that the future never can be. What has been done, experienced, and loved becomes permanent, beyond the reach of any destruction. The prisoner who could recall a beautiful evening with his wife, a conversation that had mattered, a moment of genuine connection, was drawing on a resource that Auschwitz could not take, because it had already happened and its having happened was indestructible. The fifth lesson was about humor. Even in the darkest conditions, the capacity for humor survived, and Frankl came to see it as one of the most important weapons in the psychological arsenal of the prisoner. The ability to step back from one's situation and find in it something absurd, to hold suffering at arm's length through laughter even for a moment, was a direct exercise of the inner freedom that the camps were designed to eliminate. It was, in miniature, paradoxical intention, the spirit asserting its distance from the conditions that pressed upon the body. And the sixth, overarching lesson was about the responsibility that accompanies survival. Frankl emerged from the camps believing that those who had lived through what he had lived through were not merely lucky, they were obligated. Obligated to tell the truth about what had happened. Obligated to carry the memory of those who had not survived. Obligated to use whatever they had learned in the service of those who needed it. The rest of his life, his clinical practice, his dozens of books, his hundreds of lectures, his tireless answering of letters from strangers, was the fulfillment of that obligation. What Frankl learned from the worst human experience was not a consoling philosophy. It was a demanding one, a vision of human existence that insisted on the reality of freedom, the necessity of meaning, and the inescapability of responsibility even in the most terrible circumstances. Especially in the most terrible circumstances. What Frankl brought back from the laboratory of the camps was not a formula for happiness or a guaranteed method for finding meaning. It was something more important, proof. Proof that even in the most extreme conditions, the specifically human dimension, the capacity for inner freedom, for love, for humor, for dignity, for meaning, persists. The proof cost him everything. He offered it freely. And for everyone who has ever wondered whether their own suffering could mean something, whether their own life could be genuinely worthwhile, his testimony remains the most persuasive evidence available that the answer, in both cases, is yes. Subscribe to The Psychology of Viktor Frankl to explore more of his timeless ideas.